Welcome back to this week's episode of the People Success Circle. I'm so excited to have my friend and fellow speaker, Cindy Rowe, here. Cindy is an expert in kindness in the workplace. And I have to tell you, as an HR leader, I have seen so many levers be pulled in the workplace, whether it's well-being or whether it's more training, so many different things. When I met Cindy, she was talking about what if we moved the kindness lever in the workplace? And it really got me thinking. And so I wanted to interview her today so that we can all learn about why kindness in the workplace is so important. So with that, I welcome you, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mindy. I am excited to be here.
Great, great. Well, I would love to hear a little bit about your background and how you started being such an advocate for kindness.
Well, it actually saved my life. At least I believe it has saved my life. About 10 years ago, I was in a really dark spot, and a friend encouraged me to do an act of kindness. And I did because I was really not sure what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my 40th birthday was also approaching. And I said, maybe I will do an act of kindness every day to celebrate my birthday month.
Oh, okay.
And after 31 days of intentional kindness, my life shifted and kindness became a core value. What had happened over the last 10 years have really made me realize that by doing that 31-day activity for my 40th birthday, created something within me. And that's how I built my business that I now run. I started to dig in. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have the research behind me, but I lived it. And then I started actually digging into kindness and found how impactful it was and really what had happened to me during my dark depression time and how it turned that light back on. And I was like, man, I need to get this in front of as many people as I can. It is something very special and we don't talk about it enough. And it's not about the random acts. Like that's how I got started, but it's the intentionality.
Mm.
And when I built my business, I didn't know I built it with kindness, but I actually found out through a horrible car accident and a brain injury where I was not able to work. And my clients all stayed with me. I run a marketing company and they all stayed with me and they said, we just want to see you recover.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really care about the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy cow. What? Like, why would you pay me monthly and not get the quality work that you've been getting? And it came down to kindness. And that's how they were repaying me, and that's actually shortly after that is when COVID hit and I started Googling kindness at work and in business. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it was a gold mine. And we all know what happened when we came back to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? People started talking about the quiet resignation and all that stuff. So it was perfect timing when I started introducing how kindness can be this culture builder.
Mm-hmm.
And it really belongs in leadership. So that's a long story.
Well, I love that because I think when we live something, it goes deeper into who we are. And, I titled you an advocate for kindness. And I think it's important to know, like you said, you don't have a degree or, in that or the research, but like you've lived it as an advocate. And so I actually think that is just as strong of proof for how it can impact someone's life.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about how kindness is not just a feel-good concept, but it's actually a strategy. What do you mean by that?
Well, when it's used properly, like in the workplace, first of all, when people think about kindness in the workplace, our first thought goes to niceness.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to make people aware that those are two totally different words.
Yes.
And the way we use them in the workplace means two different things. So it is a strategy when it becomes aligned with the business goals, like, how you treat people, right? And when you have kindness in the workplace, in your leadership strategy, in your core value as a human, it's how you treat people, empathy, respect, appreciation, knowing that that actually leads to business outcomes. And when we lead people with kindness, we are not saying, you can get away with everything and I'm just going to smile. It's no, we're going to have these hard conversations and we're going to get through this together. And it's the way you approach it, right? It's how you respond versus reacting.
So, what challenges or resistance do you get from leadership when you introduce the concept of kindness as a way to lead? And how do you overcome those obstacles?
Well, right off the bat, they always say it's weak, it's soft. I don't want to be seen as a pushover. And that's niceness. When I have conversations or when I'm presenting or leading trainings, I always talk about that difference between nice and kind right away. Having kindness, you are having those difficult conversations. You are, making sure that people understand one, that if they've messed up, right, and how you're going to help them get through it. It's not, not sugarcoating things. It's not glossing over things. It's having those challenging conversations. And we're all overworked. We're all stressed. And when I talk to leaders, I talk about, when you build intentional kindness into your everyday work life, it becomes easier to utilize in those stressful moments.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask anyone, do you believe you're a kind human? 99% of us are going to say yes. But are you a kind human when you're under stress, when there's pressure, when you have, a deadline?
Yeah.
When somebody else is barking down on you, are you kind? And the first response is usually like, well, I'm the leader. I have to get things done. You can do that with kindness. And the approach is just different. And it's not being a pushover. It's not being soft. I always say it's not being soft, weak, or someone you're not. At the end of the day, it's this realization that we all are working with humans.
Yeah.
And each and every interaction matters and makes a difference. So I've had a kind leader and I've had a nice leader, and I will take that kind leader over a nice leader any day. My nice leader, when I had a review, she's like, Cindy, you're doing amazing. We love having you work here. And like 3 weeks later, I was fired. Turns out she was covering my butt on some projects and fixing them behind my back and turning them in. Well, she didn't have enough guts to tell me. And I thought I was doing a great job.
So how would you define niceness versus kindness?
So niceness is polite behavior, things that you ought to do, you think you ought to do, right? It's more about me than you. Kindness is doing something for somebody else, not expecting anything in return. You're thinking more about the other person than you are yourself. You really want them to leave them better or to help them grow. And that's the difference between a nice and a kind leader. That really will have those challenging conversations. We all know in leadership, right? Like, it's never easy. And you have to have those difficult conversations, but you can do them with, respect, empathy, compassion, kindness, and get the same result that you want versus the hard,
Yeah. Difficult, hard. Yeah. Maybe not so professional. I often think, I don't think people come to work every day or really show up in general in life saying, I really want to mess up today. Like, I want to miss a deadline. I want to do crappy work, whatever. I don't think that people naturally show up that way. So when we come in assuming the best with that kindness bent, I believe that will absolutely get better results in the long run. Yeah. And honestly, as an HR leader, I have heard so many employees say to me, I thought I was doing well. I thought I was doing just fine. And so we always say, like, if someone's going to be terminated, it should never be a surprise. But when you talk about it that way with like a nice leader, it can be a surprise, right? And you're not really doing them any favors.
Right. And also, kindness isn't like without boundaries, right? But it is like making sure that we do see the human aspect of things. And just like you said, like, most people are not out to fail. We're not trying to make people's lives worse.
Right.
Or we're not intentionally messing up. So giving people the benefit of the doubt, really helps. And especially when you're in a leadership role, that should be that you have to be aware of.
So, what are some surprising or overlooked ways that kindness can impact employee engagement, productivity, or retention?
So people think that it needs to be these big grand things,
Hmm.
right? Or it has to cost a lot of money. And honestly, kindness at work could be so simple. Like just noticing that an employee is doing the best that they can
Hmm.
and acknowledging it. I talk about handwritten notes. In fact, sticky notes and a Sharpie are one of the best tools any leader can have. You notice somebody's doing something well, write on a sticky note, hey, great job,
Hmm.
slap it on their computer, their workstation, their locker, whatever, and keep doing that and just being very intentional. Seeing things like when they've done something right, call them out on that because we often just tell them when they're doing the wrong stuff.
Hmm.
So checking in on them personally,
Yeah.
not professionally, hey, how you doing with that project? No, you just know they came back from vacation. Like, hey, how was your vacation?
Yeah.
Because we're people. We want to talk about that stuff.
Hmm.
And I will say this, though. Some people are very private.
Hmm.
To crack that code is maybe see what's, if you're working together in the same workspace, right? See what's on their desk,
Yeah.
or if they are always wearing hot pink, like I typically do, hey, is that a new blazer that you're wearing? Or just recognizing them as an individual and as a person. And I just think, by doing those small things, that actually is proven to help with engagement, help with building trust. Kindness is one of the easiest ways to build trust
Hmm.
in an organization. And when you have trust, especially in a team
Hmm.
format, you're going to have people have your back
Yeah.
a lot quicker, and help chip in when the times are tough. And excuse me, it also, kindness, it's those simple things, right? Appreciation
Hmm.
and knowing how people like to be appreciated and recognized is so big. It's so little that, it does not take much. So are you starting your meetings with a little like quick circle, around saying what's going great or what do you want to celebrate? I'm part of a board for a nonprofit and we meet virtually every month. And we go around and talk about what we're, want to celebrate. It's either something we are celebrating, a celebration that we want to do about another board member
Hmm.
or a member of our organization. And it seriously takes, we're not allowed to like tell long stories, but 30 seconds a person. And now you've got a big clue of what's important with somebody.
For sure.
Really? Like if I'm going to talk about how, I survived the summer with my teen son who came home from college, okay, Cindy's got a son in college, she's super happy he's home,
Yes.
just making those mental notes and then using them,
Hmm.
going forward. It builds trust. It actually increases resilience when you have, a kindness culture within your team. And it allows you to give good feedback too.
Yeah. I can see that. That's a great idea. So, can you share with me a real life example of how you've helped a company operationalize kindness in the workplace?
One thing that for, making it operationalizing kindness is how are you hiring?
Mm.
You know, and how are you measuring kindness in the way people are reporting to you?
Mhm.
So in your reviews, are you talking about like your team? Like if
Mhm.
you have a team leader, are they doing recognition? Are they doing appreciation measures? When you hire, are you hiring for the kindness trait or whatever your business, goals are?
Mhm.
Are
Mhm.
is kindness part of that?
Yeah.
And if it is, how are you doing that? And when you're onboarding a new person,
Mhm.
are you getting them like a kindness buddy? So like that's something that I encourage people to do if they're going to be incorporating a kindness culture. Having somebody they can go to that maybe is not part of their team, but can help them crack in, especially if it's a very large company,
Mhm.
help them crack into other things.
Yes. Yeah.
And, giving great feedback. So making sure basically that your systems are supporting the kindness culture that you're trying to develop. And if you don't have that, then it's not going to go anywhere. So one company that I've worked with, they put this kindness wall up in their break room, right? And so they have made note cards where they were sticky notes, like customized sticky notes that said something on top like kindness works here. And then they shout out somebody like Cindy helped me with the project when she didn't have to. Cindy stayed late the other day. And so on this wall, you see all these people contributing and saying what they're seeing from their peers. That is huge. And it's been, people love it. And people like the person that I was working with, they said that people will take pictures when they see their name up on a sticky note. Again, it didn't cost a lot of money. You don't even need customized sticky notes.
Well, I often think about that because sometimes people will think, it's work and it should be, we don't need the fluff at work. They came here to do a job, they get paid to do a job. And as an HR leader, I've just seen over the years how a little kindness can really make that work so much more elevated and people want to be there, right? And so we're actually at an engagement crisis in the world and in the country, Um, I am certified in Gallup, and so I read their reports all the time. And, we have a 32% engagement rate in the US right now. 32% of people are engaged at work. So when we think about the missed profits in organizations because we have such a gap in engagement, it's little things like this that can really, really move the needle. And when people want to be there and they want to work with someone else, because that person is kind and respectful to them, the results can definitely be there. So, how can leaders balance accountability and performance with kindness?
Well, kindness and accountability, they're not the opposites, they actually work together. So, kindness isn't about avoiding the hard things, like I mentioned earlier. It's how we approach them, how we respond versus reacting. And, I think leaders still need to have high standards and having a culture of kindness. We've all heard, or I hope we have all heard Brene Brown say, clear is kind, right? Be clear about your expectations and the timelines. And because when we know those things as a team, as an employee, we'll work better, right? And I always say over communicate. During COVID, we all communicated way over the top, but it is starting to dwindle, right? But the more people know, good or bad, that helps us feel safe, right? Even if there's so many troubled times right now, and think like what organizations are going through, people are nervous. Are they going to have a job in 6 months? Having that open communication helps them. And, making sure empathy is top of the line, right? Like if you have to deliver the bad news, start it with compassion and let them know what's happening. And then I always talk about consistency, right? People need to know that their leader is going to show up the same way all the time. And when you are, quote unquote, a kind leader, you show up the same way, even if you spilled coffee on yourself in the commute, if your child pukes on you when you walk out the door, even if you hit every red light on the way to work, right? You're still showing up. You're leaving that outside and you show up. It's how you give time off. You're fair to everybody. It's how promotions happen. They're fair. And sometimes that's out of the control of the leader at some point, but you're not playing favorites, right? Kindness doesn't take out the hard parts of leadership, and it does not add in all the fluff. It's working with humans, treating people with respect, having compassion, and realizing that we don't show up, try to tick you off every day, and make your job harder. Most people are not like that. There are a few,
Yes.
right?
Yes, there are a few.
But knowing that, people will be moved by how you treat them. And whether you feel respected and heard, that actually does so much for the organization than we realize. And people will be willing to chip in when there's a tight deadline, or because you've built that trust,
Right.
and you demanded it, right?
Yes. Right. I had a leader teach me once that when you're giving someone tough feedback, we tend to give them like 90% of the feedback that will get them to improve. And, he taught us that if you can give them that last 10%, you're really going to help them. But that 10% is the thing we are scared to say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I often think that, am I giving someone the last 10% that can really help them? And I hadn't really thought about it from a kindness perspective, but it really is, because when a leader is developing us and they're keeping from us the thing that might be hardest to hear, but that could actually move the needle the most, they're a nice leader, right? And they're not the kind leader that you're talking about.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that was the leader. Like, if she would have told me, like, Cindy, you're messing up at this part,
Right.
you know, I think you maybe need to get a little extra training. And here I'm thinking, I'm nailing it, I'm doing everything right, it's like I'm giving myself pats on the back, It's not, I just needed a little guidance.
Yeah.
And as a leader, that's your job, to grow
Mm-hmm.
people under you, right?
Yeah.
And to make into leaders themselves. And sometimes you've got to offer them advice on getting more training, or redoing this because this doesn't fall in line with the way it's supposed to be, or finding out why they're missing the deadlines. Are they having too much on their plate and they can't handle it? I mean, there's a lot of different variables. Yeah, having that last 10%, I love that, Mindy, because that's where the growth is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where kindness takes courage, and
It
it
really
takes,
does. It really
and
does.
that's what I'm talking about. It's not that weakness. The weakness is leaving it out,
Right.
and not having the courage to speak up.
Yeah, this leader used to say to us, like after we did a review or after we had a tough conversation, he'd say, "Did you give him the last 10%?" That was just his standard line. And, now as an HR consultant, I use that line still with many, many leaders. Like, you got to give them the last 10%, because that's where they're really going to change. And I loved how you said, a nice leader, it's about you, and a kind leader, it's about them. So when you just think of this example, a nice leader would be like, I'm thinking about myself. It's really hard to give that last 10%. And a kind leader says, it's going to hurt me to say this, but it's exactly what they need to change. So you've spoken about rethinking KPIs and ROI. What would you love to see companies start tracking or measuring when it comes to workplace culture?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, making sure that you're tracking kindness in the workplace. So, those recognition, are your leaders recognizing their employees? Are people tracking that? When somebody leaves, are you having that exit survey that says, why are you leaving? Or if they are staying, whatever the retention patterns might be, are you asking your employees, are you happy here at work?
Right, right.
So there's one question I ask in my presentation, and that is, what is one word you would use to describe your organization?
Mm-hmm.
And so when the words start popping up, sometimes, people, because I can't see who's typing it, and most of the time I don't know who's in my audience anyway, these words start popping up. And I said, if you could do one thing by taking this question back and asking it to your team, can fill in the blank anonymously and feel safe doing so, would their word be the same as the word you put up? Because as a leader, we try to think positively, or we should be thinking more positively, right? Like, it's family, or it's, supported, all the good words. Would your team say the same thing? Or they'd say it's toxic, stressful, all this stuff. Asking your employees what they think about their organization and getting the right answer, man, that can move the needle, and it really will help you. People feel appreciated, seen, and heard, whatever, and they'll feel safe to speak up if it's able to be done anonymously, right? That they can do. I also think that companies really need to focus on the well-being
Mm-hmm.
of their employees.
Yeah.
I see it happening a little bit more now than it happened prior to 2020, that we take it seriously, because burnout and productivity, they don't do well together.
Right.
When you're in a leadership role, you need to model that. Putting the pause after 5 p.m.,
Yeah.
and taking your vacation days, and like that, having that well-being and having that checked off really does build that kindness. And that's another way I think that you can actually measure the success of having kindness in your culture, or building a kindness culture.
That makes great sense. So, if someone's listening to the podcast today and they're like, how can I start focusing on kindness in the workplace? Where do you recommend they start?
So I always say this, it starts with you. And it doesn't matter what your title is. Whoever's listening to this, it does not matter what your title is. You can just decide to bring kindness into your organization. Now, will it spread wide at first? Nope. But if you just start and that's how you're leading yourself, it will have that ripple effect. Start seeing people as people, intentionally recognizing them for their efforts and not just their results is huge. And just appreciation, right? I mean, I've given you plenty of examples of ways we can, appreciate, but just the sticky note factor, like that easy. But when a leader makes kindness an intentional strategy, I guess, within their leadership, it actually changes the way people feel about coming to work. It's proven.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be big. It's
Right.
free.
Right.
Seriously, it can be just you showing up with a sticky notepad.
Yeah. I do often hear that from leaders who are like, we don't have a big budget. Right. And I think that you saying that it doesn't require more of a budget, it just really requires us checking ourselves before we get out of the car. Right. And how we go into work and how we show up, and just remembering that everybody is doing their best. And when we think about that, it can just make such a difference.
Yeah. And honestly, if you really want to start small, like call people their name. People love their name, and we don't use it very often.
That's
right?
interesting.
And that just shows respect right off the bat. So if you just do one thing differently, use people's names more often.
I've never thought about that. That's such a great tip. Thank you, Cindy, for sharing all of this information with us. It's a really great reminder and something that's very tangible that we can start doing individually to make our workplaces better. So I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me as a guest, and it's been a pleasure. And anytime I can talk about kindness, I will.
I love that. I really love that you're such an advocate for it. That's for sure. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the People Success Circle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend. If you'd like to get a hold of Cindy, make sure that you check the show notes, because I will have the link to connect with her on LinkedIn and her website. Until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you in the next episode.